We're going to do some Tzav. Good morning, everybody. And we're also going to do some things on Purim. Okay? Yes. It is the time. Okay. Let us just start, though. Let's start with Tzav, though. Okay? Who'd like to lead off for us? Marta, please.
וידבר השם אל משה לאמור, צו את אהרון ואת בניו, לאמור, זאת תורת העולה, הוא העולה על מוקדה ועל מזבח כל הלילה עד הבוקר, באש המזבח תוקר בו.
Good. Someone else take the next two psukim in Hebrew, and then we'll take a string in English.
Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, Command Aaron and his sons, saying, This is the law of the elevation offering. It is the elevation offering that stays on the flame, on the altar, and the night until the morning, and the fire of the altar should be kept aflame on it.
Okay, so Zot Torah Ta'olah. This is interesting. This is the law of the Olah. Just as an aside, right? Another way of translating that would be Zot Torah Ta'olah. These are the instructions. These are the teachings. These are the instructions of the Olah. Just 1 second, Linda. Now with that, there's a very, very nice thought. We refer to the Torah as Torat Chaim. Torat Chaim means a living Torah, the Torah of life, right? That's what it is. However, if we're translating as we must over here, Zot Torah Ta'olah, to mean these are the instructions of the Olah, then how do we define Torat Chaim?
Instructions for life.
Instructions for life. So Torat Chaim is instructions for life. We just had during the Gemara class this morning. So we were discussing that brit mila is on the 8th day, of course, and the Gemara is discussing how it's doche Shabbos. If it falls out on Shabbos, you'll do it on Shabbos. So one of the guys asked, "Well, Rabbi, why is it? You know, I mean, I know the Torah says it, but do we understand why the Torah says the brit mila should be on the 8th day?" So I said there are different ideas that are presented. Right? One idea that's presented is that the person, the child needs to have experienced a Shabbos before he can undergo the bris milah. So therefore, the 8th day guarantees that they'll have been at least one Shabbos. And then one of the other guys at the class, who is a neonatologist, he said, "Well, it's very interesting, Rabbi." He said, "But it takes a good 3 to 5 days for the child to start to produce, the infant to start to produce its own vitamin K. And vitamin K is necessary for clotting. So you want to make sure that you've got at least 3-4 days of the child producing its own vitamin K before it undergoes any sort of procedure which will involve bleeding." Right? So nowadays they give the child a shot of vitamin K almost immediately. Right? But that could also be a reason. And I said, look, it's all integrated. It's fully integrated, meaning this Torah integrates all of the spiritual components, which is the child should experience a Shabbos, and of course all of the physical, medical, biological components. It's fully integrated. It's not a program that we're plugging in and let's see how it fits. This is the program. This is the hardware. This is the software. So it's going to, right. If you plug, that's a good example, I think. If you plug software into hardware that it's built for, then it runs very smoothly, right? It's not that we're trying to plug the Torah into humanity and let's see how it fits. This is the hardware for the software. Zot Torat Chaim. These are the instructions for life. And therefore, of course, there's going to be this complete and full integration. Yes, Chayrev?
Instructions always means, to me, the individual. You don't really the instructions for each of us is what I'm saying. Instructions, so that That's what I'm saying. It's really instruction for the individual
For each
who makes
person.
up the group,
Correct.
but it's always for the individual. Yeah,
And
Yes.
it applies to everyone.
everyone. But
Yeah.
we start with the individual.
Yes. Yes, Linda.
I'm sure everybody else knows, but I don't. Why is the mem small?
Why is there a small mem on Mokta? I don't have the gross gedolos here, so I could be able to look it up over there. I will look it up once I have my gross gedolos. Yeah. That just lets you know that it's going to be small. I need to look it up. I don't have Mikros Gedolos here. Mikros Gedolos is the Chumash which has all of the classic commentaries on the page there. And if you probably look at Balaturim or others would comment on it. Just one
It might be in here.
second.
After we have our homework
Might
assignment.
be in-
Yeah, that would be my task.
As a matter of
Okay.
interest, the Mikros Gedolos was the poet Milton in the 1600s or 1700s studied the Torah from the original Mikros Gedolos. The British Museum has a copy of his Hebrew version with his notes, and Paradise Lost, which speaks a lot about, is straight from here. A lot of the material.
Huh.
So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Very nice, thank you.
Isn't that cool?
That is cool.
That is cool.
That is cool.
Well, Hebrew was a requirement in those days,
Oh yeah.
in colleges and
Yeah.
in universities.
Well, you see a lot of universities have Hebrew in
Oh,
their.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Yale.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's a requirement.
so let's go to pasuk now in Hebrew. Someone take Gimel and Dalid in Hebrew for us, please.
Gimel and Talmud, that's 3 and 4.
לבש הכהן מידו בד ומתנשא בד ילבש על בשרו והרים את הדשם אשר תאכל האש את העולה על המזבח ושמו אצל המזבח ופשט את בגדיו ולבש בגדים אחרים והוציא את הדשן אל מחוץ למחנה אל מקום טהור.
Beautiful. Stu,
3.
3 and 4.
Okay. The Kohen shall don his fitted linen tunic, and he shall don linen breeches on his flesh. He shall separate the ash of what the fire consumed of the elevation offering on the altar, and place it next to the altar. He shall remove his garments and don other garments, and he shall remove the ash to the outside of the camp to a pure place.
Good. Now, the Mishnah discusses that the first avoda that was done, the first service that was done in the morning each day, was the Trumat Hadeshen. It was the removal of the ashes. It was the removal of the ashes that had accumulated from that which was burning overnight. And they would vie. The Kohanim would vie. There was a whole process of choosing out. First, they used to actually have a race, right, to see the Zrizin who were most energized to get there and do it. And then the Mishnah says that at one point they were running up the ramp, and someone reminiscent of hockey today threw a hip check, and the other guy went off the ramp and broke his leg. And they said, okay, we have to tone this down a little bit.
You can show them the first step.
Okay, yeah, that's the ramp. Okay, thank you, Dove. That's the ramp. Okay, and therefore instead they instituted that that they would have this process of choosing it out, putting out fingers, and right, sort of like eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Right. Basically, who pick a number a lot larger than the amount of people who were assembled there. Why is this so important? I mean, removing the ashes. Removing the ashes is basically your sanitational work, right? You gotta get someone to clean up before we get started. Why is such importance and such honor afforded, connected to this Trumat Hadeshen, right? And we go into, right, the Kohen shall don his fitted linen tunic. He shall don linen breeches on his flesh. right? Meaning, he's got to be wearing the big day kahuna. He's got to be, not the big day kahuna, he's got to be wearing his garments, right? He doesn't put on, a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, right, to take care of this, right? He's wearing big day kahuna. Now granted, in verse 4, Pasuk Daled, we'll see, he shall remove his garments and don other garments, right? He's not going, the expression is, right? It's derech eretz, not to dirty by taking out the ashes, the garments that he usually wears, right? And Rashi says the garments that you use to cook the food for the master, that's not the garments that you wear to pour the wine for the master, right? Which we understand, right, that when we are coming to do our avoda, be it on Shabbos, whatever it is, that we should dress in a way that gives proper honor. So he will change afterwards. However, this removal of the ashes is something that is coveted, something that is given such importance. Why is that?
The deshan is actually as sacred as the olah, as the sacrifice itself. That's what left from this holy procedure, and actually without taking the deshan out and treating it, the next olah will not be able to burn.
Okay, so you're saying two things. You're saying, first of all, the second thing you're saying, it's a practical consideration. Right? It's a practical consideration. How can you get started today if the ashes are out? So according to the second point that you're making, we might as well call Louis Cleaners, right? And have a set contract that Louis Cleaners can come in every morning at 5 o'clock. We'll give them the keys to the Beis HaMikdash, right? And let Louis and his men come, according to the second point that you're making.
Right.
According to the first point that you're making, right? This is not for Louis and his boys, right? This is the ashes from the Olah. Okay, good. Dove?
Well, first of all, one thing is every part of the service is important. That's one thing to learn. Even the small little task over there is very important. And also here, this is what Hashem's offering was. This was left over from his meal, so to speak. And you're doing a holy service, even taking
Good.
this away.
Good. If I want to add one point, and then Chaya Rivka, realize that it's not just it's all removed. We said v'samo eitzel hamizbeach, right? Some of it is placed next to the mizbeach. Yes, Chaya Rivka.
No, I was saying that in all the things we do, there's always a beginning and an end. When we say a bracha before the meal, we say a bracha after the meal.
Mm-hmm.
It's like to complete the process, because as Doug was saying, every part of this process is holy.
Yeah.
And so you don't stop until you finish the end, the last of the holy process.
Good. And Rav Hirsch, and we can understand from a historical perspective, and we have a little paragraph here that we could read, right? Rav Hirsch was the power that stood up in the face of the reformers, right? The reform movement was, I believe it began and certainly was at its strongest in Germany. And the Orthodox were viewed as this irrelevant, outdated, they just didn't belong. Just the world had gone on and they had just been left behind. And Rav Hirsch was this bulwark of erudition, of sophistication, of explaining the beauty and the relevance and the importance of our Torah Chaim, of our instructions for life, in each and every generation, each and every day and age. And I actually wrote about this a couple of weeks ago. But, it's amazing in our plugged-in world where we're constantly being bombarded by all of these different medias that are constantly, and we have to check our cell phones, and our cell phones have nothing to do with a telephone anymore. That's almost a side benefit. Oh, you can actually you can make a phone call on it?
Oh wow.
I can't just use it to move money between this account and that account, and to check on the news, right? And to be up on all of my emails. It actually has a dial. It has a dial function. Amazing. What will they come up with next? Right? A computer that could be a phone, right? So nowadays, and I wrote about this recently, there's a strong movement towards having a Shabbat. They don't want to call it a Shabbat, but they're talking about having a day when you unplug.
4 hours.
I'm sorry?
I think it's 4 hours.
Yeah, well, some say for a whole, whatever it is, but the world is starting to understand what our Torah Chaim,
They're telling us all the time.
right, and how important that Torah Chaim, those instructions for life, are for us today. That yes, in this world, Shabbos is necessary. It's vital to have this emotional stability. To have the sense of not needing to know each thing that's going on every minute. I mean, it's amazing.
It's crazy. It is.
And that is, so Rav Hirsch, take a look on page 569, right, in the English there, underneath, right, under the line there, in the second column, it's the fourth paragraph. Ve'irimet hadeshen, he the Kohen shall separate the ash. This is the first service of every day. The Kohen scoops up a shovelful from the innermost ash on the altar and places it on the floor of the courtyard, east of the ramp that leads to the top of the altar. These ashes must be from the burnt flesh of the previous day's offerings. Rav Hirsch comments that by taking a portion from yesterday's service and placing it at the side of the altar before beginning today's service, the Kohen symbolizes a national declaration that today we'll continue to serve God as we did yesterday, according to the dictates of His will.
So this fire is to perpetually burn?
Yes.
Okay, so you would have to take the ashes out because you wouldn't be able to keep the fire going if it just built up ashes.
Yes, that's the practical consideration, right? But the importance that we're giving, and then we're putting the ashes next to the altar, is to realize that we are carrying on, right? We're not starting anew, right? As we were discussing before, Eileen, right? It's not about, well, let's wear a kippah when I'm praying in the synagogue, but outside of that, right? That we're not recreating, we're not rewriting. We're taking the ashes. We recognize where we come from. A famous story, I believe, with Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky. I just told a story about him on Shabbos, that he and his wife had a wedding. But he was on an airplane, flying Israel, New York, Israel, whatever it was. And one of his grandsons was on the plane. And his grandson was doting to his grandfather, who was one of the Gedolei Hador, which is one of the greatest of the generation in Torah, not just scholarship, but in Torah practice, in Torah permeating, wisdom, in Torah completely permeating the whole person. And he had a grandson who was doting to his grandfather, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky's every need. And next to Rav Yaakov was a very important person from Israel. I think he was a Knesset member, right? And he was in shock because he said, Rabbi, I don't know how you do it. I'll tell you, my grandchildren, right? They look at me as this relic. I'm the old man, right? And I see the way that your grandchild has such amazing respect and reverence for you. How do you do it? So Rav Yaakov, with a smile in his eye, said to him, it's simply a result of what we've been teaching our children. He said, we teach our children that we come from Adam and Eve, who were created by God. And we all stood at Mount Sinai. So a grandchild looks at a grandfather, at a grandparent, grandfather, grandmother, as being one generation closer to Sinai. One generation closer to Adam and Chava, to those who were created by hand. Others, maybe he said you, maybe he said others, I'm not sure, teach that we come from monkeys. We evolved from monkeys, we evolved from apes. So a grandfather is 2 generations closer to an ape. So the ashes is our reverence for the past, our respect for the past. It's not something that we simply go and discard. It's said about kashrut that the two simanim, the 2 signs of a kosher animal, is split hooves and chewing its cud. And we list the animal that has split hooves, doesn't chew its cud, is the pig. And there are 3 animals that are listed. We're not so sure exactly which those are, but the camel is certainly one of them, of those that chew their cud but don't have split hooves. And I mentioned before that the Western world are the pig eaters. Right? The Western world is pork. Those are the pig eaters. And the Middle East and the Middle Eastern world, we'll call it, right? Those are, I don't know if they eat camel, but certainly, sorry?
They have camel milk.
Yeah,
Camel
but they
ice
identify, right, with the camel.
Yeah.
So there are those that explain that the hooves represent motion, movement, going forward, progress. The Western world is all about progress. What was yesterday is outmoded. Natalie and I went. We went to a house because we were looking to buy from Craigslist. We were looking to buy a dining room set, right? And it was a beautiful, beautiful house with a beautiful dining room set. But the house, they were redoing the entire house because we went there. This must have been first moved there about 2008, 2009, because that house was so 1990s. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was so 90s.
So yesterday.
Yeah, that's the Western world, right? As soon as this comes out, the next one is already on the heels, and this is you still have the 4, the 4S, the 5, right? That's constantly moving forward, right? That is the Western world, who are the pig eaters, who have what? The hooves, but they don't chew their cud. Chewing the cud, that's a regurgitation, right? That which has been swallowed down comes back up. Chewing the cud is all about the past. And the Middle Eastern world is mired in their past. They had a very illustrious past. Algebra from El Jabbar. But nowadays, it's all about the past. They still have to avenge the dishonor that happened to the Muslims 800 years ago. That's what they're worried about over here. And even their wealth comes from fossil fuel. What's oil? Right? It's all the past that is decomposed. So the Middle Eastern world, they're the camels. They're the cud chewers. The Western world, those are the pigs. That's the split hooves. Forward, more, faster. And Judaism, we eat those who both chew their cud and have split hooves. So we have that reverence and that appreciation for the past, and we're building on the past, and we recognize those who came before us, who they were, what they were, and we have our responsibility to move forward. So we have the ashes. The day begins with the ashes on the altar. And they're not just, it's not Louis' cleaning service. It's the Kohen wearing his big day kahuna who deals with that. And we don't just dispose of it. Some of it is placed right there next to the altar. And then we start today's avodah. And then tomorrow we'll have the ashes from today and the next day's avodah. That's our tamid, our constant, every day, the carbon tamid, every single day. We take from the day before, and then we move forward, and we build and we build. Chai Rivka.
I've been thinking about this a lot, about how we live. There's two different ideals you have to juggle in a way. If you're a Torah observant Jew, there's a certain consistency in life. You do it this way. You don't say, well, I could do it that way, or maybe I could do a little bit more, or I could do a little later, I could do something. But in the world, in the secular world, things are always improving and being discarded and improving. So you're living in these two mindsets, and I can see where people could get confused and want to even change the Torah.
Yeah.
Because you're changing technology all the time.
And the challenge really is for us to have this hitchadshus, this sense of renewal and purpose and enthusiasm and excitement in our avodah. Not by trashing what was, but by infusing life into it for ourselves. Because that is a challenge that we have, not to settle into a pattern. There's a story with the Satmar Rebbe that he had a very, very distinctive voice, and he had a very distinctive way of davening on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Very, very distinctive way of doing it. And at Hasidic weddings, they have a badchan. A badchan is at the end of the wedding, when most of the guests have gone, then the immediate family, the close family and very close friends stay, and they have a badchan. A badchan literally is like a joker, right? And he'll tell stories, and he'll tell about this person, but it's not a roast that you put people down. It's meant to be, laughing but inspiring and uplifting. So there was a badchan who was doing all of his things, and the Rebbe says, do something about me. Right? No, I insist. No, I insist. So the badchan does this perfect imitation of the Rebbe, his voice, the inflection, the mannerisms, the cries of the way he davens on Yom Kippur. And the Rebbe started to cry. And the badchan was devastated. And he said, Rebbe, I didn't mean to insult you. I didn't mean to hurt you. I apologize. And he said, you don't have to apologize. I thank you. The reason I'm crying is not because I'm insulted. The reason I'm crying is you did such a beautiful, perfect imitation. It made me think, am I imitating myself every year?
Rather than being anew. That's internally.
Yeah, and that's the challenge. That's the challenge that we have. The challenge that we have is, are we, in our religious observance, in our religious fervor, in all the things that we do, are we stuck? Are we imitating ourselves? Or are we infusing ourselves? When it comes to Shemona Esrei, so there's a pasuk that says, Kol atzmotai tomarna Hashem mi kamocha. All of my bones will say, Hashem, who is like you? From there, the Mishnah Berurah says, we have the custom that some people when they're davening, what do? They shuckle. They move when they're davening. Why? Because kol atzmotai, all of my bones are involved in my saying mi kamocha. Others, I'm standing before the Creator. They'll stand there. Standing before the Creator. You're not going to be, you're standing before the Creator. Which one is right? Both.
What suits you?
Whichever gives you a greater sense of reverence.
That's what you need.
But what I try to do for myself personally is I try not to do the same thing all the time. Because otherwise,
Becomes a habit.
Becomes rote.
yeah,
It's a habit.
right? And are you imitating yourself, as the Rebbe cried, or are we renewed? So that certainly, Chai Rivka, is the challenge that we have. That within this framework, because we understand Torah Chaim, this is the instructions for life, meaning we can't create our own spirituality. How do we pierce from this physical world to the spiritual realm to God? Only through the means which God says is going to work. I say, well, I think this will work. Very good. Very good. I think that if I do this to the airplane, it will fly better. But I don't really know. So they're going to keep me away from the wings. They're going to keep me away from the engine. So we don't really know how it is that we're supposed to get up there. So we have this Torah Chaim. We have these instructions from above as to how we are supposed to do it. So we have to stay within the program if we want to fly. Now, but we are meant to be excited, energized. So therefore we have to see within those parameters, right? For me, learning is what gets me aflame. For this person, chesed is what gets me aflame. For this person, davening. So it doesn't mean that I'm going to do this to the exclusion of others. No. I'm going to keep to the program, but my personal area of focus is going to be in that which I have my contribution to make. That which keeps me aflame. Yes, Dov.
Something also interesting here, talking about the ashes, I think they're commanded in the middle of the altar to put a large pile of ashes over there. The altar is outside. When a little wind comes, ashes go. They never moved over there.
Well, the mission of us speaks about the different miracles that took place there. One of the miracles, I don't mention that the ashes, it mentions that the smoke would go straight up and would not be. Yeah.
So that tells you how important it is to Hashem. If those ashes cannot be moved by the wind.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Okay. Yes, Chaim.
I'm sorry. Because it means when something comes out that's new, let's say, and it's a fad or everyone's glomming onto it, then the first source we think about, we look toward is the Torah. Is it in the Torah? Is it promoting Torah? Right? I mean, that's number one. And then we decide, should we buy an iPhone or not, or whatever. But will it help Torah? Will it not help Torah? It seems like...
Look, ideally, a person looks at this world as a means to an end. It's a means to an end of becoming more godly and thereby uniting with God. So on a certain level, a person measures what's going on in their life and what they're doing and what they're choosing, uses that as their barometer. Right? It's a certain madrega.
Isn't it important how you get there too?
Yes. Well, absolutely.
That's exactly
Absolutely. And look, and a person needs to take realistic steps. If a person is going to say, I am going to, it's very interesting. A very interesting article that I read, and I really felt this when I was in high school. When I was teaching high school, before I came out to California. And there was, when you are counseling someone or when you are helping guide someone along the way, the Shulchan Aruch can't really be your playbook. The Shulchan Aruch needs to be your destination, but it can't necessarily be the playbook. Meaning someone comes and they want to become observant. If the Shulchan Aruch is the playbook, and you say, listen, here, this is the list of the do's and don'ts, chances are most people, certainly when you're dealing with high school kids at that point in their life, right? It's not, right? If this is what it involves, then I'm not ready. I'm out. So it needs to be the destination. It can't be that, yes, the plan is, that you never need to do. That's clearly the destination. But in order to reach the destination, there need to be steps that are taken. Most people need to go, in order for it to be lasting and meaningful, it needs to be step by step by step. So how we get there, right, is certainly important. That person needs to be honest with themselves, but go according to their pace, right? And certainly, see, I'm not sure if you might have meant something else, right? Because doing mitzvot, right, and doing it in a way that it's, the famous, I'm running to shul to answer amen, to say kedusha, and I knock over 4 people on the way, right? But that's not just a matter of the end was right, but the means was wrong, because the means is also an end. Meaning every interaction that I have is an end. It's not, well, I need to do this, so this is a means to that. Whoever I see on the way to shul and how I present a Torah Jew to that person, that is an end. I want to get to shul, but so there aren't really these means and ends, because every situation is giving you the challenges along the way, and those are ends in and of themselves. I was having a conversation with someone that and it was amazing. This person was telling me that at a point in their life, they were becoming a lot more engaged religiously. And not growing up religious at all, but they were becoming a lot more engaged religiously. And this was a time which was really going to set the course of the person's life. And they were very, very enamored, impressed by this teenage boy, by a young man who was somewhat of his teacher or mentor, and he was on a certain path. And then he saw this person act with complete disregard to, in this case, it was to some blacks, right? And he saw this person act with complete disregard to those people, and he became so, which of course is absolutely wrong. Every human being is created b'tselem Elokim. And he became so disillusioned that it wasn't immediate, but he was going in a certain direction, and once that happened, it was certainly a redirection away from it. Now, this person, right? We were inside learning. We went outside, right? So the outside is just a means, right? It's a means to relax a little bit, right? Perhaps in those days before you knew better, to have a cigarette, right? And then to go back inside. That's just a means, right? No, that's an end. That was a defining moment for this person's life, which means his life, his children's life. This was a defining moment. That was not a means. That was an end. And very sadly, that it was a bit of an end for this person's inspiration and trajectory. It was a bit of an end for that. So how we get there is not just a means to an end. Our days, labriut, are filled non-stop with all of these situations. I always say it's a responsibility. It's a responsibility. We never know who might be, certainly here in Irvine, walking around with my kippah and my tzitzis out. It's a responsibility because I stick out. That there is an Orthodox Jew, whether he'll know that I'm a rabbi or not, irrelevant. There's an Orthodox Jew. And if I hold the door open, if I don't hold the door open, if I smile nicely, if I don't, it's all ends. Every moment is an opportunity for Kiddush Hashem, to sanctify God's name, or otherwise, and we have no idea who we might be impacting one way or the other. Yeah.
To your credit, you smile often.
Thank you. I try to smile a lot. I think it's important. I try to smile a lot. Thank you.
One of your midot might be mitzvah b'simcha.
I try. Thank you.
I'm not sure.
Okay, Linda.
I'm also wondering, going back and kind of connected here, the removal of the ash, it seems like a lowly job. But the fact is that a lowly job, what looks like a lowly job in the service of Hashem, is an equal job to anything else.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Part of
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
much bigger.
Another
Yeah.
example.
They say that Yehoshua used to sweep the floor. He used to sweep the floor of the study room, right? Yeah, and if I see any wrapper on the floor, right, in the shul, certainly, right, I'm very happy to pick it up to help beautify.
I just want to say, when I moved here 14 years ago, my son from Israel visited me, and he wore his kippah and tzitzis, and you didn't see that much in Irvine. Wherever he went, to Rite Aid or wherever, people would say, "Hello, Rabbi." At Reverend, he couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
He walks around Israel, nobody says, "Hello, Rabbi." Nobody does anything like that. So there is a certain of respect and
I had that
yearning.
one of my first days here in Irvine. I went to Rite Aid, and I'm waiting online there to fill a prescription, minding my own business. There's this woman, this blonde woman, must be in her, probably about my age, right, who's just like staring at me. So first, and then I just kind of like, all right, and I nodded. What are you going to do? You're not going to keep avoiding someone's eyes. So I nodded. I said, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it was. She comes closer, and she says, "I just want you to know that we love you." I'm from New York. I'm getting a little bit nervous. We love Israel. So I said, that's very, very comforting. Thank you for sharing that with me. And I thought that's a lot better than I used to hear in New York. Right? But we represent. We represent ourselves.
You can hear it a lot here.
Yeah.
I'm, wearing this, they ask what it is, and and I have a prayer here. It's a Hamsa, and here there's a prayer in Hebrew. So whenever I say I'm Jewish and I'm from Israel, it's a blast,
Just
we
so
love
you-
you with and it's the whole.
Yeah.
Just so you shouldn't all get too complacent, in 1970, when I was in graduate school at the University of Wisconsin, my wife was waitressing. She had a button on it that said "Save Israel." And one of the people in the restaurant walked up to her and said, "Who's Israel?" Okay?
Elu ve'elu.
True story.
Yes, Susie.
One quick question. You were talking about shuckling. So is that where it comes from? All of my bones?
Yeah, I believe that minhag is based on that pasuk of Kol Atzmosai, all of my bones should say Micha Mocha.
In all the
Where is
It's a
organs,
pasuk of Tehillim, I'm not sure exactly where I can look it up. Yeah.
all the organs and pianos,
Yes.
Another example of seemingly a tedious or repetitive or menial task that actually has some importance. Sterilization. There's a heat and pressure sterilizer called an autoclave. And whatever you need to sterilize, bottles or salt solutions, etc., you load in. And of course, a tremendous amount has been done to show that the sterilizer, it's called a validation ahead of time, before you start your sterilization cycles, to show that it actually will kill all the bugs.
Okay.
So a lot has been invested before, like with the korban and before, say, the burning. But when you run the sterilizer cycle, you put in some indicators that can show that there was a kill or a color change and sensitivity. But the loading, there are heavy racks, and then the steam is going to be released once you start the cycle, and the vacuum pressure, lowering the pressure. And then it's wet afterwards, and you have to clean and do preventive maintenance. But supposing if you didn't and some bug remained, then when that goes on to a clinical situation, like if it's a saline solution, someone could get
Interesting.
infection.
So the follow-up is important. Good.
So,
Good.
but whoever's
Good.
loading it and
Got it.
stacking
All important. All important.
So sometimes
Let's-
it'll be a technician
Yep.
and not a maintenance person.
All important. Absolutely. Let's jump to a little less time than I thought, but let's jump to Megillat Esther, page 1252. Maybe next week we'll also spend a little bit on Megillat Esther. All right, David Foreman has a great thing on the name Purim, where it actually comes from. There's a double meaning in the word "pur," but maybe we'll say that for next week because that's a bit involved. Let's go a little more generally. Page 1252 in the back of the from Hashem, we have Megillat Esther.
One question.
Maybe they save it for afterwards. Okay, so the sages say that all holidays will become batal, will no longer apply when the time of the Messiah, except for Purim. Except for Purim. Purim is going to be, right, the Pasuk says that these days will never leave from amongst us. Right? What is so unique about Purim? Why is Purim so relevant to us today? And what is our focus meant to be as we celebrate Purim this Saturday night, this Motzei Shabbos, and Sunday? Because realize, as we say in the Bracha She'asa Nisim Lavoseinu Bayamim Haheim, that miracles were done for our predecessors in those days, Bizman Hazeh, in this time. So as we mentioned a number of times, a Jewish holiday is not a commemoration of an event that took place. It is a redocking, a revisiting that station. What's it called in Disney, where you go? Epcot?
Sparrow.
Yeah, where you go to all the different pavilions now in Holland? Epcot. Right? So when you go to Epcot, right, you don't say, oh, there is England. You enter into that pavilion and you are there in England. And our Jewish year is this circle that we re-enter these zones. In Pesach, we re-enter the time of Geula, of redemption. It's a time for us to go through a personal redemption from whatever it is that we are involved in. And Shavuos is a time for us to be Makabel Torah. As we know, Rosh Hashanah is a time for us to be judged. Yom Kippur is a time for us to be cleansed and forgiven. So, Bayamim Haheim Bazman Hazeh means that we re-enter that zone. That's why we say in the Ma'os Tzur, B'nei Vina Yemei Shmona Kavu Shir Urananim. B'nei Vina, those with understandings, Yemei Shmona, these 8 days they established as a time. Was it the men of understanding? The men of understanding who the next year they understood that mood, that aura, that availability of Hanukkah was back the next year, then they established that as a yearly holiday. So what is Purim about? And Purim came historically at a very vulnerable time in our history. This is towards the end of the 70-year exile between the destruction of the first temple and the rebuilding of the second Beis HaMikdash. And everyone knew the prophecies, actually, about 70 years. But it was unclear, where do we start the counting from? And Belshazzar, with the proverbial handwriting on the wall, made a party celebrating the end of the 70 years, thinking that 70 years have passed, Jews have not been redeemed, that's it. God has rejected them. And he wore the garments of the Kohen Gadol, and he used the vessels, and he was killed that night. Achashverosh made his party that the Megillah begins with. His party was also to celebrate the end of the 70 years. He too wore garments of the Kohen Gadol. They too used vessels of the Beis HaMikdash. So it's a time where we had been in this exodus from Egypt, Har Sinai, 40 years, Israel, 480 years later, we are building the Beit HaMikdash, and we're on this constant ascent. And then comes the destruction. And we're in exile. And this is not the order of events. This is not the direction it's supposed to be going on. But there's a prophecy of 70 years God will remember us. And different calculations of 70 years, where you're starting to count from, have passed with nothing. And the period of prophecy has come to a close. They're no longer prophets. So we are feeling so adrift. And we are so troubled. Is it over? God's not talking to us anymore. Are you there? Are you there? Do you care? Are you involved anymore? Destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, in exile, no prophecy, and then we have this Achashverosh and Haman set to annihilate us. And it seems to be that that's the course that we're heading on. And as I'm sure you all know, God's name is not mentioned once in the entire Megillat Esther. Because there was no overt presence. It was like talking into a tunnel. And maybe hearing our echo, if that much. And it was a time of Yeush, of giving up hope. It's really all over. And the miracle of Purim and the reset button for Klal Yisrael is that God is as intimately involved with us as a nation, as we say in the Ten Commandments, mibeit avadim, not just on a national level, but on a beit, on the house, on an individual level. God is as involved, but in a more hidden way. But He is there, orchestrating the events. And the Megillah, the Gemara says, why don't we say Hallel? Why don't we say Hallel on Purim? On our holidays, we say Hallel. Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuos, Chanukah, Rosh Chodesh, right? We say Hallel. Why aren't we singing the praises of Hashem on Purim? And the Gemara has a number of answers. One of the answers the Gemara says is the Megillah is our Hallel. The Megillah is our song of praise. Our song of praise, our uniquely Purim song of praise is that God is orchestrating all of the events. Vashti goes down, Esther ends up in the palace. The orchestration of events is all being finely calibrated for the Yeshua. Right? And just one pasuk that we'll focus on for a minute, and we'll revisit this again next week a little more. But when Mordechai knows what's been decreed, and he comes to speak to Esther, turn to page 1256.
Is that 12?
1256, yes.
Yeah. No, I meant perfect 12.
No, we're going to go back a little bit.
You're in 5.
Okay. Mordechai's in a sackcloth. Verse 5, to the very top. Then Esther summoned Hattach, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordechai to learn what was this about and why. Hattach went to Mordechai to the city square, which was in front of the king's gate. Mordechai told him all that had happened to him. The sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to the royal treasures for the annihilation of the Jews. He gave him a copy of the text of the decree, distributed in Shushan for their destruction. He may show it to Esther and inform her, bidding her to go to the king, to appeal to him, to plead with him for her people. Right? Mordechai wants Esther to go to Achashverosh. Hattach came and told Esther what Mordechai had said. Verse 10, that Esther told Hattach to return Mordechai with his message. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces are well aware that if anyone, man or woman, approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, there is but one law for him: put to death. Except to the person the king extends the golden scepter, he may live. I have not been summoned to the king for the past 30 days. It's suicide. It's suicide for me to go. They related Esther's words to Mordechai. Then Mordechai said in reply to Esther, stop, cover it over. Everybody stop and cover it over. Don't look. You're Mordechai. What do you say to Esther at this point? We need you. You're our only chance. Now you're going to step back? Look at the position you're in. You're the queen. The entire Jewish world is resting on your shoulders.
No pressure.
We need you to step forward. No pressure. We need you to step forward. It's all up to you. Let's hear now. Mordechai said in reply to Esther, do not imagine you'll be able to escape in the king's palace any more than the rest of the Jews. If you persist in keeping silent on like this, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from another place. You think we need you? We don't need you. Relief, deliverance will come from elsewhere. You and your father's house will perish. Who knows whether it was just for such a time as this you attained the royal position. Right? Not what we would imagine. We need you. Rather, who needs you? This isn't for us, this is for you. What is this? This is how you get a person motivated, right? The guy's getting up, right? He's the last batter. 2 outs. Bottom of the 9th. Bases loaded. Your team is down. You get up there. What does the coach say to him? Who needs you? Who needs you?
Not quite.
But in this world that God is intimately involved, God's going to run this world. If we're going to be saved, we're going to be saved. And it's not up to you. This is the conversation we had before. I told people before the last election. It's not up to the American electorate what's going to happen to who president they're going to choose and what's going to happen with the eternal nation of Israel. We have to play our role. But it's not ultimately up to that. Right? This is God's world. Esther, you can make a difference. You can decide which role are you going to play. Are you going to be the savior? Or are you going to be complicit in what's going on by doing nothing? You have your role to play. But this is God's world.
He'll get another savior, you mean?
This is God's world.
Yeah.
Right? Purim is all about our world. All about our world. We look out the windows, we see this amazing sky and clouds and trees. We say, wow, what an amazing world God made. Or we look at the same thing and say, wow, Mother Nature. Who would have thunk? Amazing. We decide. We decide what we're going to see, what we're going to recognize. Do we see it or do we ignore it? That is the Purim message. God is no longer speaking overt prophecy. There's no longer thunder and lightning on Har Sinai. But God is as intimately involved in this world, and we need to make that connection. Yes, Debbie?
I would like to end today with an inspirational email that I got this morning that I felt I must
Great.
share with everyone. Got an email from a friend of mine in Israel about the Malaysian air flight. Did anyone receive that email?
Thanks, Ina.
It comes from
Yeah.
Dan. Did you get it?
Yeah, I did.
The one from
So the flight
Dan-
just disappeared and they still haven't...
Flight
Yeah,
is-
you find them.
Disappeared it out.
It comes from Dan's
They're getting closer.
email. Comes from Dan's deal, which apparently I think I've heard of Dan's
Dan's
deal.
deal.
Yeah.
It's a large, some kind
Yeah,
of.
yeah, it's
He's a blogger.
From
it's a
Dan's
discount.
And it is a series of emails between an individual who was booking flights from throughout the Far East, and he booked these flights in January, and he wrote to his travel agent. There are the emails, one after the other. Please book me flights from this, and this. And one of them was from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing on March 8th. The travel agent wrote back to him and said, I can get you all the flights except for that one. I can get you that one, but since I am an Orthodox Jew and you are Jewish, I will not book you a flight on Shabbat. If you wish to fly on Shabbat, you can make that booking yourself. The guy writes back on the email, fine, good. Get me all the other connections. Apparently they had a long-term relationship. Get me all the other connections, I'll do the other thing myself. A couple of weeks later, he writes back and says, I changed my mind. I'll go to Beijing on Friday. Find me a place where I can get a decent meal for Friday night, or for Friday. So the guy arranges...
Chabad of Beijing.
Yeah, the guy arranges for...
Chabad of the Mars, of the moon.
The booking
Yeah.
goes through, everything is fine. This man doesn't even realize, he lands up in Israel, at this time he's now in Israel. Suddenly, from Israel, he suddenly wakes up and sends an email to his travel agent saying, I just realized you saved my life.
Yeah.
Because of you, I didn't fly on Shabbat. The travel agent wrote back and said, it's not because of me, it's because of God and Shabbat. Because more than the Jews have observed Shabbat, Shabbat has observed the Jews, or saved the Jews. And that was the story. But
That is-
to me
and that
this
is Purim.
morning,
And
I
that is
just
Purim.
got it, and that is exactly what
And
you
that is
just
Purim.
said. That's exactly what you just said. It ties
And
in
I wasn't
so
sure what to
perfectly.
write as my
Oh.
newsletter this week, and I thank you, Debbie.
Wow.
You've taken care of it for me. Usually I write it on Monday. I had a
You
crazy
want
day
me to, I'm
yesterday.
planning to email it to Rabbi T also. I think you should
Yeah, and I'll be able
use
to
in
find
your
it.
speech.
I'll be able to find it.
Is it already? It's there already? I got it this morning.
A whole series.
Where is it?
It came up on my Facebook.
Wow.
I don't know
Uh-huh.
how Facebook works, but
Yeah.
I can
was
email
trying
it
to
to you.
No, I'll get it.
You'll find it.
I'll get it
You'll
before
find
you get it.
Right,
Before you
Dan,
get back
when I get
home.
to my car, you'll have it. Dan's deal.
Yes, Dan.
So this brings up three issues. So now you see, you observe, you're awestruck. It's an amazing sky. Without Navi, what's the filter? I mean, for example, I have a potential luncheon today. Is it an opportunity for networking, or is it a distraction and temptation that I should avoid? How do I know what the message is?
look, if it's part of your work, so you do your work, but make sure you make a Kiddush Hashem when you're there. If it's not necessary, so then,
No, I mean, it's a professional organization I belong to, but it's not part of my work. Should I say, oh, it's an opportunity I can go, or is it just something I shouldn't be doing because there are other priorities?
well, what's the value judgment? What else would you be doing? If the plan is, otherwise I'm saying Tehillim, right? I'm saying Tehillim with my eyes, dripping with tears, right? And you don't really need to go there, I'd say, yeah, say Tehillim. If otherwise you're going to go home and go on to Dan's Deals, wherever it is, and they should probably go network.
So I guess my point is though that every day you're faced with,
Yes,
you
we are.
saw and you're aware.
We're-
How do you know which
we're-
message it is?
The message is we need to utilize our time the best we can.
And again, sometimes there's not clarity on what is best.
That's human beings.
Well,
That's,
so
those are the
That's our choice, that's our
You may learn afterwards.
That's our world.
Rabbi,
Ma chovato ba'olamo.
Rabbi,
Right?
Rabbi,
Yes.
it's funny how you were talking about nature, and yesterday,
Decide what.
Yossi and I had a discussion about Peru, I don't know why, and Yossi was in Machu
So maybe
Picchu.
we'll learn the next time.
So
It
we
wasn't
said,
right to know
you
how
know,
to apply that.
It's not that this place is one of the most beautiful. There are more beautiful places in the whole world. It's something that I don't know how to express it. So I said to him, "It's you and nature and God." And he said, "You know what? You're right." And Yossi, he's so godly,
But he is.
You know what?
You're right.
But he
right.
is. But he is. That's why he fights me. That's why he fights me so much. It's because he is.
And then
It's
last,
my
Okay.
husband, yeah.
Lastly,
Yeah.
Thanks.
the blessings where it says, has commanded us regarding the reading of the Megillah.
Yeah.
So, everybody's obligated to hear Megillah, but if you had only a minion of women, the woman can read.
Then a woman will be able to read it for the woman. Yes.
Yeah, but then the woman is not required to read what they're not obligated, even though it says us,
Men and women are obligated equally.
to read
in-
and hear.
Yeah, we're all obligated to read or to hear the reading. We fulfill our reading of the Megillah through someone reading for us, and him having kavanah for us,
Right.
and our
But
right.
supposing it was only a women's circle.
So
and
then
there
the
were 10,
woman would read
would
for the
she
woman.
say this blessing?
Yes. Yes. Thanks, Devonta.
Do we wear costumes?
Thank you.
Huh?
Wear costumes.
We should certainly wear costumes.
Friends of Purim, everybody.
Friends of
Happy
Purim,
Purim.
happy
I have
Purim.
to wear nice in there.